American Conference schedule just got released earlier this week, like I said. A lot of big time games for this conference in the non conference window. Week 0, opening game, you have Navy versus Notre Dame. That game's in Ireland. Big time opportunity for Navy, getting a big time program like Notre Dame to agree to a non conference game like that in week 0. Remember last year, Nebraska Northwestern played in the Ireland game. That game did pretty well for ratings, so this is huge for the American Conference. On September 2nd, East Carolina, they traveled to Ann Arbor to take on Michigan. Also on September 2nd, Rice, they traveled to play in Austin, Texas to play the Longhorns. And also on September 2nd, this is a big day. Ole Miss also has to play at Tulane. That's probably the biggest game of the day for the conference. Number Tulane, they finished off their season very well, beating USC in the Cotton Bowl. Biggest turnaround in college football history. And now Lane Kiffin has to take a out-of-conference road game, even though he's in the SEC West. Hardest schedule. And I'd say Auburn probably has a harder schedule just because they play Georgia every year. But Ole Miss, they play the SEC West schedule every single season. And now they have to take a trip to Tulane. Definitely not ideal there for the Rebels. Charlotte gets a Big Ten opponent when they go on the road to play Maryland. On Saturday, September 16th, Oklahoma, they travel and play Tulsa on the road. It's a big opportunity for Tulsa. Also, Alabama travels and plays South Florida on the road. You rarely ever see Alabama take a road game like that. But yeah, they have to travel to Florida to play the Bulls. They finished last in the American last year, so I don't know how much of a test that's going to really be. On that same day, Florida Atlantic, they have a matchup with Clemson. Saturday, September 23rd. Now, September 2nd was a pretty big day, but the 23rd, this might be the biggest day and the biggest opportunity for the American Conference in terms of games outside of the conference. Games that day include UAB at Georgia, Charlotte at Florida, Florida Atlantic at Illinois. Yeah, they go on the road to play Illinois. Memphis versus Missouri, that game's in St. Louis. Miami Hurricanes, they travel to play at Temple. UTSA at Tennessee, this is a big-time matchup. Frank Harris, the electrifying quarterback for UTSA, he's returning. UTSA was one of the better non-Power 5 teams last year. Now they're headed to Knoxville, take on most likely Joe Milton. Never know Nico could get that starting job, but nonetheless, that's a pretty big game. And then SMU at TCU. This will probably be the nightcapper. Probably the biggest game that day. Sonny Dykes versus former team. TCU after coming off a national championship game appearance. Hosting SMU. And then Saturday, September 30th, Boise State at Memphis to end the non-conference. Now, the biggest and most important conference games, when making this list, I looked at the top contenders in the conference. Then from there, I found games that could have the biggest impact. Some of the top contenders that I think will be battling for the title in the American Conference are Tulane, UTSA, SMU, and then my dark horse is Memphis. I'm not picking Memphis to win. I just think they're a team that are probably going to be picked near the middle to the bottom, but they could surprise some people and end up at the top. So some of the top conference games include Tulane at East Carolina. That's on November 4th. SMU at Memphis on November 18th. Tulane at Florida Atlantic on November 18th as well. And then on November 25th, UTSA at Tulane. And then back in October on the 13th, Tulane travels to Memphis to play the Tigers. And I have some trap games here for some of the top teams to keep an eye on. November 25th, Memphis at Tulane. Or Memphis at Temple. That game, I don't know where that falls on their schedule in terms of... Because I know SMU plays at Memphis on the 18th. So that would be a pretty big game for Memphis. They get to host SMU, but then they have to turn around and travel to Temple, and that's why I think that's going to be a trap game for them. Then you have SMU at Temple. SMU at East Carolina. Those are back-to-back. SMU, prior to that and after that, they have some pretty big games. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And then UTSA at Florida Atlantic on October 21st. Now, UTSA, they're probably going to be right up there, probably top 20, top 25 team to start the year. And they have a pretty good shot at being a one-loss team when this game arrives, given that they play Tennessee. I know not many people are going to pick them to win that game, so they could have one loss. And they could easily look over Florida Atlantic, and that's why I put that as a trap game on there. And then the conference championship game is on Saturday, December 2nd for the American Athletic Conference.